So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Amanda Miller. I'm with Leadership Northern Colorado. I want to thank you for sharing your afternoon with us today. We are excited to be hosting the April Leadership Moment with Dani Grant, owner of the Mishawaka and Chippers. So thank you again for taking time out of your afternoon to be here. We also want to recognize and thank our Leadership Northern Colorado Steering Committee members. So for those of you on the call, if your camera is on, do a quick wave to say hello to everyone. Thank you for your dedication and time that you put into this program. We want to recognize our sponsors and thank them for supporting Leadership Northern Colorado. So I will do a quick screen share and just want to elevate elevations. That was not intended as a pun, but we want to lift up elevations and thank them for their support of Leadership Northern Colorado in the program throughout the year, not only for the current participants, but for these leadership moment sessions as well. Additionally, a few reminders for today. If you can please keep yourself muted during today's conversation. And if you have questions for Dani, we ask that you put those into the chat. We have committee members that will be monitoring chat, and we will definitely save some time at the end. If you've got questions that come up, we can ask Dani then at the end of the interview. And finally, we ask that you mark your calendar and save the date for our May Leadership Moment session. It will be the second Tuesday in May. That falls on May 10th. And just as standard, we will host that event at 3:30 p.m. We hope to announce our special guest soon. So details coming soon, but save the date in your calendar for May 10th. And I will turn it over to Todd Carl. Todd will be conducting our interview. Todd is a member of the Leadership Northern Colorado Steering Committee, and he will be connecting with Dani for today's discussion.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here. As Amanda mentioned, I'm a member of the Leadership Northern Colorado Steering Committee, and I work for Ent Credit Union by day. So that's the background behind me there. We're so fired up for our conversation today, and I'd like to welcome in Dani Grant. Dani is the owner of Chippers and Mishawaka. We're so excited to hear about all of your perspectives on leadership. Dani, could you please say hello and let us know that you're there?
Great to see everybody here. I see some familiar faces. It's exciting to see how this organization has pulled together so many great people from our community, and I'm excited to be here. So thanks for having me. Who am I? I am an entrepreneur from Northern Colorado. I have been working in Fort Collins for about, I think it's been like 17, 18 years now that Chippers has been established. I live here with my 3 girls who actually are moving on shortly in college and off on their own. And my husband, Matt, who's my business partner, who I've worked with in all of my ventures. Anyway, I came here and started working actually in consulting. My background was commercial construction, interestingly. But when I left that position, I went to work with my husband doing small business, doing sales and operations. I'm a process and systems person. That's where I thrive. And when we came to Fort Collins, we acquired Chippers Lanes. And when we were there, we were doing a lot of programming work, which got me into the music business. As we put together these programs for people to come in, I started to really understand what an incredible music scene that this small town has. And as I found that out, I really became engaged with trying to see how I could be a part of the business community, but also a part of Fort Collins culture building, trying to leverage some of the cool stuff we had going on here with New Belgium long ago, and with all of these artists. How do we provide the rest of the world knowledge about what a cool scene we have here? So I began to work not only in my businesses, but also with young musicians, doing development work and doing economic development for the city of Fort Collins. Today, I own and operate the Mishawaka, as well as work on Chippers operations. I also am a member of the Music Policy Forum, which is a national policy board that works with cities across the country on different best practices for cities that are trying to do arts and culture work with venues across the city and that kind of thing. So that's a very exciting board for me to be on, that's provided me an opportunity to meet a lot of people across the country who are involved in music, arts and culture, and also people who work with cities, mayors, tourism boards and that kind of thing. So that's been really an incredible thing. And I also consult for agencies such as Black Fret, which is similar to my organization, Spokesbuzz, is a development operation for artists that provides grants to up and coming artists. So I'm excited to be a part of that. And as they grow from Austin and Seattle into their third chapter here in Colorado, I'm directing that effort for them. So I think that's everything.
You wear a lot of hats, that's for sure. And I always find it fascinating when business owners, which requires such an analytic mindset, when someone like you is also so involved in the creative side of your brain. I'm really excited to explore that today. So Dani, with you managing and operating these venues that are sort of spread out all over the community here, we're curious to know what your priorities are for each of your venues in 2022 and maybe beyond.
Yeah, so I mean, you mentioned, Todd, that I have like these kind of different facets of my personality, and I'm a business owner. I was raised by a visual artist, and so I spent a lot of my life translating between the two of them and really seeing much different perspectives from each of them on how they approached things. And I think that's really carried through into my business operations and into what I want to do. I mean, I want to work, but I want it to not feel like work. So I want to work in a way that I can love getting up every day, because as other business owners know, it's not just 9 to 5, you kind of live work. And if you're live working in a field that doesn't fill you up or make you, be excited to get to the next project, then it's no fun. And then it's not something you want to continue doing. So I work hard at that. And I do love what I do. I love also being able to be creative. I did a psychology test on myself long ago, and it talked about me being this creative entrepreneur that's like got lofty ideas and is always bouncing around, but tethered to the ground by my organizational and operational, obsessive compulsion. So that'll give you an idea of like how I am in my business world and what I do. And I do love creativity. And for my businesses, I try to develop incredible teams that can run the businesses with advisement and encouragement from me. I'm very good at creating processes and training people to do my job so that I can go do other things that help support the business in different ways. And I think my goal is to create those teams that feel like they have a real say and authority in the direction of the business. And then also really bring in the community piece, and not just as a marketing, hey, we're part of the community, but like really creating opportunities for the community, bringing in the arts and culture that I love so much into my operations and into the things that I'm doing. I'm really kind of keeping my people engaged that way. I think if people become stagnant, they're unhappy with their positions, it's because you're not trying hard enough to develop them and keep things fresh and new. And I can't help that, because I need it to be fresh and new all the time. Like I've got to jump into new ideas all the time. I worked with Julie Suter a lot in my life. She was a great partner of mine in Spokesbuzz, and she always used to say she was my throttle, which is definitely what you need. You need a throttle on your team for sure. But one of my objectives this year in particular, coming out of COVID, with the whole kind of build back better mentality that I think we all came out of, was to create more diversity and equity and inclusion in my businesses, to try and really stretch the boundaries of that, try and really be intentional about what I'm doing from within my team, and also the shows that I'm booking, the events that I'm attending, the things that I'm encouraging here in Northern Colorado. I think that's probably my major focus right now.
Well, I would say, Dani, It certainly must be important for you to have that support staff, because you've got interests all over the place, and it's great that you are able to keep that fresh. I'm kind of curious to get your opinion on where you think your work is having the greatest impact on the future of the Northern Colorado region.
Well, I think a lot of the economic development and national presence work that I've done has been important for Northern Colorado. I think, assisting people like Katie Schneider and, Colorado Creative Industries in trying to develop that perspective of Northern Colorado. It's not a cow town. Like, this is definitely, an educated and creative community that has a lot of diversity. So I think that's been an impact from the work that I've done. And I think also, just keeping music and arts and culture a part of our everyday conversation by, working hard to make Mishawaka a gem of the community. I think people are very proud to have Mishawaka as their kind of home venue. And my husband and I don't really feel like it's our place. It's really this community's place. It's been here for 116 years. I'm hoping it's here for another 100. And the time that we spend owning it is really just a small piece of the life of this business. And so I think we're trying to steward that so that it becomes really owned by the community, that it provides a space for anybody in our community to hang out, whether you're a punk rocker or you're a country fan or whatever it is, but that is kind of a cornerstone of our community. And I think, getting out there in the public eye and being, working through sponsorships of things and other community events helps that too. So
don't forget about us hip hop heads. The Mish is a great place to go for a hip hop show too. So
yeah, hip hop on the hillside's coming back. Yeah.
Can't wait.
Yeah.
So, Dani, Leadership Northern Colorado, we're kind of scattered all around Larimer and Weld County. And so we're especially interested to hear, because you're a unique business leader and that you've got these locations sort of scattered around, like many of us in the class here. We focus on regionalism in Leadership Northern Colorado. So we would love for you to reflect on what it's like doing business across these regions in these diverse areas in which you do business. Can we get your reflections on that?
Yeah, I mean, I've found it fascinating working, in Estes and Greeley, in Broomfield, Fort Collins, and then up in the canyon with the mountain folks. It reminds me a little bit of genres of music. There are different fan bases. There are different kind of, cultures that you need to be aware of. And one of the things that I think I've learned the most about this is to be really vigilant about listening and trying to understand and know what is the community that my business is in, and allow the different businesses, even though Chippers is a small chain, each one of our centers has its own personality and it has its own focus. There are even different products available, based on what's, really interesting for the people in the communities. And I also got a great perspective working nationally with Music Policy Forum and having worked with many cities across the country and kind of getting a perspective too on Seattle's, culture versus, Los Angeles or Washington, DC. And I think the more that we try and participate in, communities, like if there's forum groups in different parts of the country or things like that, I think it really helps give a perspective. And then trying to help connect those communities as well. I think that's something that the Front Range really could use help with. So while I want to recognize all the differences, I also want to bring things to each community, and I'll refer to music specifically as an example, but there are, musicians in Colorado Springs who have never played in Fort Collins, and they don't have the opportunity to do so. And so if you really work hard at trying to share those communities and share opportunities, I think you develop relationships and you start to create an opportunity for people to understand communities differently. we see this problem, of sometimes we get siloed, even in our businesses, right? Like you don't want to partner with this company or that company, and they could be competitive and all that. And I think one of the biggest things I have learned is that siloing is actually not helpful in a competitive, situation, that really trying to partner lifts all boats, and I think having that, approach and trying to bring people together across the communities, but also listen and know who you're talking to, and, and have the courtesy to really dig into it and learn. But I think ultimately trying to nationally, bring people together so that Seattle knows what a cool scene Fort Collins is, and then here more regionally, Colorado Springs to Fort Collins, and try and share that. That's always been a philosophy of mine. And I think it's really served my businesses to partner and to work with other venues, which are competitors of mine, but also can be partners as well. So.
Well, that focus on regionalism, that's a big deal for us here in Leadership Northern Colorado. So glad to hear your perspectives there, and to know that you're focused on that too.
Yeah. I would add one thing to that too, is finding people in those communities that are leaders, and reaching out to them and talking to them. That's been a really incredible, helpful thing for me. Doing research and figuring out who those organizations are that are being leaders in those communities, and connecting with them, and again, listening. So
sure, very cool. Well, let's shift to some good stuff. We want to know about your biggest success, or like your number one point of pride that you can think of from your time as a leadership, or your time as a leader.
Yeah, there are two things that come to mind, and the first one is an easy one. It was the 2015 South by Southwest Colorado Music Party that we did in Austin. That was such a moment of pride to bring the state of Colorado to an Austin music festival with 120 musicians from across the state, and provide them with training and information about how to, best utilize that experience. And then to see that come to fruition, and to see so much camaraderie, and it was incredible, that experience. I would say that would be my most big experience, where I worked for weeks on end, and then at the end cried out of joy. It was really a special event. But I think probably the most impactful moment in my leadership was getting through COVID with my staff. And, I feel like it's good to get knocked down every once in a while to rebuild and reboot. And it was the first time in my career that I was incapable of making payroll. And that was a humbling experience. And it took a lot of leadership skills that I had to really get them going. It was the most difficult time in my career, but it's the most rewarding too, because the things that my incredible staff were able to achieve during that time were setting examples across the country. And, and I've never had such success out of just terrible situations. So that would be the number one.
I think probably everyone on this Zoom has had some sort of rags to riches recovery story from that. So thank you, Dani, for sharing that. That's awesome. So I've got one more scripted question. I'll remind everyone that's watching here, if you have any questions for Dani, go ahead and leave them in the chat, and then we'll review all those right after I ask you, what is if you have one, Dani, like a favorite leadership book? We like to share our ideas in this group on leadership books. So if you've got one that you like, we're all ears.
I just want to mention two, because one has been my historical book that I always go back to over the past 20 years. And it's a really simple book by Michael Gerber called The E-Myth. And that always sometimes really clarifies things for me when I go read this very simple book. You can read it in 2 days. And it's just always kind of been like the building blocks for me that I can go back to when sometimes I make things too complicated, or I'm thinking, I'm putting too much thought into something, and I'm like, let's just go back to the basics. But my book that I'm reading right now that has been probably eye-opening and really special for me, maybe as I kind of turn the corner on my career a little bit, is called Ego is the Enemy. And that book is written by Ryan Holiday. And that book basically just says, shut up, Dani, and like, why are you doing what you're doing? And what do you really need to be doing? And what are things really about for you? And what do you really need out of your career and your life? And what's most important? So Ego is the Enemy is, it's not an easy read for someone who's, a leader and someone who probably has a little bit of ego in the things that they do. But it's an important read. So I challenge you to try and get through it.
Well, your segue into our first question in the chat is perfect. And Julie, I hope I'm not screwing this question up. It's a question about your throttle that you mentioned earlier. Can you explain a little bit about that dynamic? You seem like a pretty dynamic person, and you got lots of ideas. How does it work? How's your relationship work with your throttle?
Well, I'll give you a great example, a very recent example from last week. I have, my production manager is getting ready to start the season, and I really, really wanted to do a stage extension and create a new truss for the stage, and I wanted to get it done in 4 weeks. And I started, I got the structural engineer up there. I was like, we can do this. All I need are caissons, and I can source the truss, and I'm good. Like, I can figure this out. And I've actually begun to throttle myself a little bit. I probably conjure Julie up in my mind when I do this, but my 3 a.m. thought was, this doesn't have to happen right now. It just doesn't have to happen right now. And I went back to my team, and while they are amazing, they'll support me on any idea that I have. They'll do it, no matter how horrible they feel about it. And so going back to my production manager and saying, you know what, Will, we're not going to do this now. We'll wait to the fall, and we can have this great stage extension for the 2023 season. And, he about fell down hugging me. So, but it's like the ideas are great, and you get pumped up and you go, but it's always important to hear the people around you, or at least by the next day, recognize like what you're seeing and hearing. And pushing too hard on things can really wear down people, and I tend to like thrive on that, but not everybody does. And so it's important to kind of have people around you who are not afraid to say that is a dumb idea, and then I'll be like, oh, and I need to receive that, in the good-heartedness that it is, and say, you're right, you know what, we can do this differently, or, well, then how would you do it? And that just creates better output in the long run, for sure.
Sounds like it's a tough balance, because it sounds like you've got some people that'll go to the walls for you no matter what you want to do, but then you also need them to be your throttle sometimes too, and your governor and anything else. So that's a great response. Right. Thank you.
Sometimes it's just their facial expressions. That's all I need to focus on.
Okay, so Marissa wants to know what you see, and you could think about this in terms of any of your venues. What do you see as your biggest challenge now coming out of COVID?
Oof, there's a few. The service labor shortage is incredibly impactful for me. That, it's a real thing. I have customers come in sometimes to the restaurant, and they're like, I don't understand why there's a 30-minute wait. There are 6 open tables. And I'm like, I know this is hard to understand, but we only have one guy in the kitchen. That's been a huge struggle, and it hasn't gotten better. It hasn't come back around like I thought it might. So we work hard to try and figure out work-life balance for our service people, and we have limited hours now, and when we shut tables off and we work on the flow of things. And then from the music perspective, national touring was really impacted, and it was impacted through COVID. And then right when it was about to resurge, it takes about 6 months to plan a national tour. Right when it was about to surge again, we had the Omicron setback. And that really messed up touring for 2022. And so I'm challenged right now with my diversity and equity mission to try and create a lot of different types of bands at the Mish and a lot of women and BIPOC artists. And I'm kind of stuck with a lot of Colorado bands this summer. And so it's a real challenge for me. And I'm not ready to give up on working for it. And I'm willing to invest in that, which is something, that's difficult to do, especially coming out of COVID, but that's a huge challenge.
Well, I guess I don't want to speak for all of your patrons, but we'll forgive you if it's nothing but Colorado bands this year, because that's a good place to watch a Colorado band.
Yeah, for
Well,
sure.
well, Dani, I'll fire off one last question here, and we like to ask this of everyone that we interview here. Tell us about your first job. I mean, not the commercial real estate job and all those cool jobs that you had. I mean, like the very first job, and then if you have any perspectives on leadership that you picked up from that job.
My very first job was when I was 12 years old. I worked one day a week in a hair salon, and I worked from 8 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night. And I got paid $20 for that day in cash. But, it really taught me, it was the first experience I had working with a lot of different people and a lot of different customers. And I think it was eye-opening to me to see how many different types of customers there were. And so it was my first great lesson on customer service, and I was 12 years old doing perms. I don't know if you remember perms, they roll those tight little things and all the chemicals. And I was doing that and laundry and stuff. I had a great time doing it. It was a fast 12 hours, but it was a tough job that didn't pay a lot. So I guess I learned maybe pay better.
I think you may have picked the only job more difficult than working in restaurants. So yeah, good for you. Good for you. Well, Dani, thank you so much. We have so appreciated your time. I'm going to kick it back to Amanda with a few closing comments. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Todd, for managing our interview today. Dani, thank you so much for sharing your day with us. Such an inspiration. We're excited to be back at your stages enjoying music this season. So thank you for all you do to bring that cultural element to our region. Yeah, thank you. Again, thank you to everyone who joined us today. This video will be available on the Leadership Northern Colorado website. We encourage you to save the date for the May session. That'll be May 12th. Also want to thank our sponsors at Elevations Credit Union for supporting Leadership Northern Colorado. And just so great to see all of you today. Thank you for being here. Enjoy your afternoon, and wish you all well. Thanks.